and Stuart Boothman are trying to members. And can I assume that they are an accurate record of the meeting? Any opposition to that? No. So anything arising from that won't be dealt with in the rest of the meeting? Silence again. So there's no urgent items, so we go on to item 6.
Sorry, sorry to interrupt, Olivia. Can I just check? I'm not sure you asked for the cameras to be turned on, so I'm not sure if that's happened and that we're live.
Oh dear.
Can we just check that with Kate?
We are now live.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So can we go on to item 6, which is the Northern Forest, which is agenda 7 to 9. Sorry, who's giving that presentation?
That's me, Olivia. Charlie.
Charlie's there, right? Okay, great. Carry on, Charlie.
Okay, thank you. Well, thanks for inviting me. I will just be providing verbal today, as we are very much in the infancy of the project. So I'll just provide a verbal update. I'm pleased to say that we were tasked with having a plan in place for December, and we've actually achieved that plan and actually started formal planting in December. And given the current climate, I think there's been a great achievement from all the team. What I'm going to talk about is England's Northern Forest, what part Wakefield play in developing and growing that forest. The Woodlands Trust have been working with the community to help develop plans for the Northern Forest, which will be stretching across from Liverpool to Hull across the M62 spine. So the way that Wakefield does provides a small part of a much wider plan to create England's Northern Forest. And the reason that we do that is currently across the Northern Forest, there's around 7.6% of woodland. And across England, it's around 13%. And within Europe, it's around 44%. Wakefield currently stands at 14.2%. So we did some mapping earlier on this year, and that's our current tree canopy. Now, one of the main reasons across the spine from Hull through to Liverpool is there's an anticipated population of 13 million, which is due to rise by around 9% over the next 20 years. That's expected to see around 650 new houses built over the next 20 years, and that will see an investment of around £75 billion in housing and transportation over the next 25 years. Now, initially, despite that huge projected growth that there was at the time, there was no plan or strategy around the natural environment to complement those changes. And it's really pleasing that they are now coming around, and we're now having plans in place to address that. If we talk specifically around trees, they are such a valuable asset. They're basically the lungs of the world. And there's a lot of evidence around the benefits of trees. They support traffic calming, they improve the quality of the place. Roadside trees will improve air quality. They'll pick up particulates, they can contribute to stormwater management by integrating suds, for example, into the design of the woodlands. And another key thing is that around 70% of flood events are surface water related floods, and it's estimated that just a 10% increase in green cover reduces flooding or flooding rates by around 5%. So again, it's another great benefit that comes from trees, or that trees provide us. They also provide a really benefit to the community and the health of the community. So they improve air quality, physical health, as well as mental health. Trees also reduce the perception of distance. So that in itself helps to encourage active travel and promote walking and cycling, something that we're trying to do as an authority anyway. Wakefield's part in the White Rose Forest, which is a joint venture, and it covers the Leeds City region area. The collective aim of the partnership within the Leeds City region is to increase tree cover by a minimum of 17.5% and a maximum of 21.6%. In our part of Yorkshire, by 2048. Now, North Yorkshire and York Council will be joining us shortly, so we'll then be known as the Western North Yorkshire White Rose Forest. So again, we're really expanding those opportunities, and then working alongside the Mersey Forest, the Manchester City for trees, the Haywoods, that's the Hull and East Yorkshire. We'll be working with the Woodlands Trust and the Forest Commission, many other partners, to create a new northern forest. And the anticipation of that is going to be really good, and it looks fantastic, the potential that we're going to have. As an active partner, Wakefield Council's initial contribution is working towards the project is to plant, we hope, around 240 hectares of woodland, and that's on council-owned property, and the timescale for that is we're hoping to do that over the next 5 years, and that'll be subject to land suitability and other consultations that need to be carried out. Now, we've managed to start this winter 2021, and we're hoping to finish the initial project, the phase 1 if you like, by 2024-25, and that's an hectare. If we're looking at 2,000 trees per hectare, that equates for the local authority around 480,000 trees that we're going to plant over the next 5 years. Now, in order to meet larger targets set for 2048, we do need additional land. So there's only so much available land for the authority to use, and we do need to look at other land for tree planting, and this is going to involve other landowners. So we have quite a bit of work to do yet as a partnership in working with landowners and encouraging landowners to participate in this. And there's a number of things that we anticipate are going to come on stream from central government that will help us to support that. What I'm really pleased to say, and the timing of today's being invited today has been great, because we actually started the formal planting on the 1st of December. So Wakefield Council launched its initiative for the first tree planting event at Thornmore, and this date coincides with the National Tree Planting Week. Councillor Hemingway was there and led the charge, and he attended to help us plant the first 500 trees. So it's a really good achievement, and it's a great opportunity to be invited today. The wider reasons around this is that the Climate Change Action Plan, which was approved by Cabinet in September, sets out how the Council intends to become carbon neutral. And its plan itself comprises of 6 work streams. White Rose Forest falls within one of those work streams under carbon offsetting. I'm not going to talk any further on that, because I know that Peter's invited today, and I'm sure he's got plenty to say about that. We have identified around 20 sites for planting this winter, and we're just awaiting confirmation from the Nature for Climate Fund, so that we will have sufficient funding to purchase trees over this 5-year period from the White Rose Forest, and that's due imminently. So we hope to be really well funded in terms of purchasing our trees, and we're also going to look at using Thorns Park Depot as an area for tree stock, so we'll maintain a tree stock. We're potentially, if possible, going to look at growing plants on as well. So there's another opportunity for us. And what I would like to just close with really is that we will be reaching out to volunteers within our community, our schools and our local businesses who wish to kind of contribute, get involved, come and help us with some, come and help us plant some trees. And they can do that through the council's contact centre telephone number. And that's really the initial update, and it would be really nice to be invited back again in a year's time to kind of show some of the things that we've actually done. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlie. I'm aware that Nick Farmer's lost all sound, so I hope that comes back soon. There's two people wanting to ask questions. Can I just say, first of all, it always concerns me, Charlie, about the type of trees. Are we checking all the time that, in fact, the trees that are being planted are the ones that are going to last? Because there's infection and there's ones that really shouldn't be in this country and all sorts of issues like that, isn't there?
There is, Olivia, and it's a really good point, that. And yeah, we're looking at what you call biosecurity on that. So all our trees are managed properly. They're all native species, and they're a mixture of native species. But we do bring about a good point. We have got issues with ash trees, for example, and we are putting a plan in place to address the issues around ash trees, which is a disease. But the trees that we plant are all native trees, and there's a mixture of those. So yeah, we are very keen to ensure we get the right trees in the right place.
Thank you. Kevin? Councillor Swift?
Yes, sorry, I've just demuted myself. I mean, thanks to Charlie for his report. We had a good session on site on Friday, I think it was, Friday last week, kicking off the tree planting down off the end of Thornsmoor Road. One of the suggestions that Charlie made at the time, which was partly sparked by the level of interest shown by the people who were going past us. We were in an area where a lot of people walk. Was actually that we shouldn't hide our light under a bushel, and that we should actually be doing things that, information boards, that kind of thing, so that people who see the planting are actually able to see how it's part of a much bigger scheme and all that kind of thing. The other thing I wanted to say, though, was that we've got this incredibly commendable project that we're hearing about, but unfortunately at the same time, when new housing estates are built, trees are being squeezed out. And when I think of just how leafy, not just kind of posh bits of sandal, but how leafy, for instance, Luxett Estate is when you look at it from the town centre, and you compare that with some of the estates that are being built now, where the way in which they're designed and built is such that there's simply no room for any kind of decent sized trees. You will yourself, Chair, be aware of the really horrible example of the development on Bar Lane, where it's not only very harsh internally, but very, very bleak externally. And I think that we can kill two birds with one stone. I mean, Charlie quite rightly pointed out to the fact that we haven't got unlimited council-owned land to plant on. We can kill two birds with one stone and actually not only get more trees in Wakefield, but also make it so that the places where people live are actually nicer and nicer to look at. As I say, we sometimes compartmentalise the different things we do. And I think if we start looking at our planning policies, there's an awful lot of trees that can be very, very beneficially incorporated within new development that takes place. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I've already asked planning to look at how is there any way that we can retrospectively do anything and for future planning applications? Because obviously 2,500 houses are being built at City Fields, and again, an awful lot of greenery has gone, but I'm not sure it's being replaced. So we'll look at that.
Yeah.
Charlie?
Now, would you like me to respond?
Yes, please, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, two really good points, Councillor Swift. So, point one, we are discussing at the White Rose Forest level around communications, and our climate change communications officer, Jenny, is helping us and assisting us with that. So we are going to look at a major communications around this because trees are so important. So you've got a really good point there, and that's something that we are going to be working on over the next few months. And then the second point that you raise is another really good point. So within the developers and planning applications, we're going to be looking at what you call biodiversity net gain. So what we're going to be doing is asking new developers to contribute to a net gain of 10% biodiversity. So we're going to be asking developers to contribute to that, either directly on that development or somewhere else within the district. So we are keen to make sure that new developments contribute to the both the protection of trees and new trees, planting of new trees. So two really good points. So thanks for that.
I think it's Tony Wallace next, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Olivia. I think, Charlie, that the scheme is good, and I'm very pleased. I've got a piece of land at the edge of my ward, which is between the Potteries and Whitwood Mere, which we've had trouble with, not just for years, for decades, because it floods. It's council-owned land, and I'm pleased that it's been identified as being, well, not just identified, but that the tree planting is to go on there, and that will alleviate the flooding and both help with the problems what we've had with the land. I've talked with residents, with people I meet about the Northern Forest, being very much welcome, although, as I think it's already been highlighted what we're talking about, some people have said, yeah, it's all very well, but you give planning permission for houses on land what's green, what's already got trees. Are you just simply replacing that rather than increasing the number of trees? On the widening beyond the council, I'm pleased what you said about bringing in other companies, because you're right, there's only so much land was council land. Now, at the edge of Castleford, between Castleford, Airedale End and Ferry Bridge, there's a huge wood, Fryston Wood, which is a shadow of its former self. It's nowhere near as good as when it was when I used to go in there when I was a boy. And the wood is actually owned by the power station. So I would have thought that bringing this wood back into its former glory would be a top priority both for the owner, the power station, and for agencies like the Council of Woodland Trust, because that would show a seriousness of tackling climate change. So I'm pleased what you said about other companies being involved. I'm also pleased what you said about volunteers, because quite clearly we need volunteers as well. So my question on that is, you mentioned them, Charlie, but can you give us some sort of time scale? You say something's coming forward from government. Have we got a time when that's likely to be? Thank you.
Yeah, it's on. First of all, the Fryston Wood belongs to Scottish Southern. So one of the roles that we will be doing is working with them and other landowners, and how we increase from the current, or as you say, bring that back to a nice woodland. Timescales is part of the Environment Act, and I'm just trying to recall the date for that now when that's due, but it's imminent. It's imminent. I haven't got an exact date, but it's imminent. It's part of it.
Okay, thank you. You've named the act, Charlie, so we can find out. Thank you. But yeah, and sorry, I'm interrupting you.
No, that was it. That's fine. Thank you.
Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I was just wondering in terms of what involvement have yourself and other officers had in terms of ongoing sort of development. So at the minute over in Nottingham, we've got the local area master plan, which has been drawn up by consultants, and that's still ongoing. And I don't recall at any point sort of, I know the idea of the development and that is it's going to be quite green and have trees in it, but I don't think at any point there's been any sort of specific focus on that or any land identified exclusively for anything like this. So I just wondered what involvement there has been with ongoing sort of projects like that. The other thing I wanted to query as well is, when we talk about trying to get more trees in developments and housing and that, I wondered, like, is that feasible to actually get developers to commit to that? Because my understanding is you can then end up in situations where it can be, like, for instance, where you have developers meant to put trees in, they put them in, and that's the end of it. So I don't know, like, how can we sort of ensure that this is something that is actually done properly rather than just leaving it in the hands of developers who sort of sometimes do a little bit of a half-baked job?
Yeah, I mean, some really good points. One of our officers is involved in the master planning, so they're keeping an eye on what's coming from any master plans to ensure that trees will be sited as part of that. And it will be, as I say, it will be part of the piece of work that we're going to do as a partnership now with the Right Wales Forest as a whole. So it is something that we've thought about, and it's something that we are working on. The immediate issue was to get a plan in place, this initial 5-year plan. So we will cover that, and that's a really good point. Secondly, I think you're right. I think one of the key things is we don't want to be relied on developers to put trees in and to look after and manage those trees. So part of the process and the planning development, we have officers that contribute to that. So every time there's an application around a development, our green space officers and myself look at those and we make suggestions and recommendations. And through that, we're going to have a proper monitoring regime in place so that when we do commit to any mapping or any tree planting, we'll make sure that there's a proper, robust regime in place as well to ensure that that happens. And that's all captured on a GIS system, and that's captured at a local level within Wakefield, but then the much wider level through the Right Wales Forest. So that will help us in terms of managing that process to make sure that they don't die, because they do take the initial 5 years, 3 to 5 years. They do take some looking after and have to be planted properly. So that's the job that will ensure that happens. So again, really good point. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey is saying, will the grants be used to remove rhododendrons from New Miller Dam and Secker Wood? And if so, when will this work take place?
Well, the tree planting is a separate one. We have had grants for rhododendron before, but that would be a separate project. So we have had, I think we've had £15,000 previously where we worked on rhododendrons at New Miller Dam. So it wouldn't form part of that. It's not about that removal, but that is something that would come within the plans around the whole wider green space. So we've done that at New Miller Dam and Secker Woods. But it won't be part of this programme.
Okay. Councillor Dagger, a comment and a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, yeah, I do welcome this initiative. I think it's a good initiative to reduce the carbon footprint. However, doing a little bit of research into tree planting, it is important that trees are planted in the right places. You know, they don't want planting on, peatland and grassland, because this could have unintentional consequences for climate change. And my question to Charlie is, how do they ensure that trees are being planted in the right place?
Well, again, another really good question, and you're absolutely right. It's really important that we plant trees properly. So we've got an experienced forestry team with about 40 years experience within that. Hello? Sorry, we have can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can.
We have an experienced team, forestry team, and a forestry manager who deals with the management of all forestry and planting. We've also got a green space officer with 39 years experience. So part of the process of planting is to go out, and when I said we're expected to plant around 240 hectares subject to consultation, well, part of that is looking at the land, the soil on that land, and the whole conditions and what the land's been used for previously. So we would ensure through that experience that there's a robust process in place for planting, and that goes through to the Forestry Commission. So it's signed off by, we do an ecology survey, archaeology survey, and we get them signed off by the Forestry Commission. So before we planted any significant substantial planting, the Forestry Commission have to sign off the reports that we put in, and it is an actual report for each area. So that's how we're kind of we have to ensure that we're planting the right trees in the right way, in the right manner. But really good question, thanks.
I suppose my concern on that is that a new road is being built, Neil Fox Way, and the trees there certainly were putting in tarmac and cement and quickly died. And I've been nagging for some time. I think replanting has finally started, but it's been a long, slow job.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think district-wide there's a number of trees that were planted in the 60s that are now coming to fruition, and they're growing, and they're now causing us some issues in relation to where they were planted and did we plant the right trees. So a lot of work's gone in from the team to make sure we're planting the right trees. Well, first of all, they're the right trees, they're going into the right place at the right time, and they're being taken care of in the right way, in the right manner. And unfortunately, you're right, some trees have died, and we have had a number of areas in the district which we've identified for that. So we ensure now that there's a proper regime in place. So going forward, hopefully we'll be able to pick some of that back up. And again, we're not just looking at achieving a planted target, we're looking at all the benefits that come from trees. So we would be looking at where we can improve woodlands, which were mentioned earlier. So that really is the way forward for us now. Trees are firmly embedded within the forestry team and the arborist team, and hopefully through the communications that we're going to set out, they'll be embedded through communities and schools and everybody else who has a vested interest in that.
I think Kevin Swift is making the point, though, that if developments have been initially applied for, have they made room for trees? And I mean, often it means that if you had more trees, you'd have less houses and less profit. But that's the important thing, is to actually accommodate them properly, isn't it?
It is, yeah, absolutely. And that will go through a formal planning policy on all planning applications, and that has to be enforced as well, so that's enforceable.
So it'll be interesting to see if it's involved in the master plan, that's the local development plan that's being publicised at the moment.
Yes. Yeah.
The Welbeck site, the developer there is putting a lot of trees in, but we're putting a lot of trees on the land that's ours as well. Does that contribute to this number?
Oh yeah, very much so. Yes, absolutely.
So again, it's the right trees being put in the right place.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's really important that. And again, we're kind of we've done the planning sort of stage, and we're now in this position where we've started this year. We haven't managed to plant what we wanted to plant this year through a number of different issues, but we are going forward now. We're going to find lots of issues and areas that we need to improve on as a White Rose Forest partnership, but also as a Wakefield Council. And we've Welbeck, for example, we have asked for copies of the plans to make sure that we're happy with them and we can comment on those, and things like that will become part of the process. So our team of experts, if you like, will have an opportunity to comment prior to planting taking place.
And if Catherine Bozeman was able to be at the meeting, she puts a particular emphasis on schools. She says, can we ask that schools are really prioritised to contact and offer tree planting over the next months along boundaries as hedges, or to subdivide areas within the school ground to create further outdoor learning spaces or vegetable gardens or whoever there is. Schools have a land that the councils or academy trusts own and need to be maintained for educational purposes. Trees on school sites offer significant benefits for air quality, ease of access for planting and care, education of school pupils and staff, involvement in education of pupils, families and wider community members, community participation in joint enterprise, supporting wider community and social benefits during the pandemic. Tree planting is an outdoor activity that needs to be done as soon as possible, and whilst permission is sought for other land for tree planting, schools can be drawn to start growing the trees and locking up carbon. If nothing else was possible, children could be supported to establish tree nurseries.
Absolutely, 100%. So we have a list of schools, and we have a list of areas surrounding schools where there is potential for planting. We've got a green space officer, Sinead, who is going to provide a plan around engaging with schools and doing exactly what you've just said. But we're also mindful that the wider climate change team that Peter will be talking about shortly, they're also looking at working within the schools and engaging with the schools, and we're looking at what you call green walls and hedges, which is exactly what you've just mentioned there. So yeah, absolutely, schools have played a pivotal part, because school children today, planting those, will become adults in a few years' time, and those trees will start to mature as the young people mature. So we're hoping to really create a nice kind of circle of improvement and respect for our land and our green space. So yeah, absolutely.
That's really exciting, isn't it? Is there anybody else that wants to make a comment or a question? Nothing's coming up for me. Kevin, did you want to say something else? No. Silence. No. Right. Thank you very much indeed, Charlie. And we'll look forward to future reports and actually seeing the trees being planted.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. We move on to the next item on the agenda now, which is the Climate Change Action Plan and the Green Recovery. And both Peter Leighton-Jones, I think, is presenting, but I think, sorry, is Gary here as well? No?
No, it's just me, Chair. Yeah, Peter's here. This is me.
Just you, right, dear. Okay. You're very welcome, Peter, and tell us where we are with this plan.
Peter's here. This is me. Yeah, so I've got some slides to talk about the green recovery, but I'll start by giving a verbal update on the plan, I suppose. But before I do so, can you hear me okay? Because the network signal on my side is really poor.
Well, I certainly can. Hopefully everybody else can. I know Nick Farmer's having problems, but hopefully they're being resolved.
Let me know if I start to break up, but I'll go ahead and see how we get on. So we did have a members briefing a couple of weeks ago now on the Climate Change Action Plan, which is the first, or was the first, in a series of focus groups as part of our public and stakeholder consultation process around that plan.
Yeah, I think that was very well received. It was good.
Yeah, and attendance was really good as well, and lots of good questions were asked. I know Councillor Harvey submitted 36 questions, which we're working through at the moment, and I think that will be of use to everyone else as well, elected member-wise, to see what Councillor Harvey asked, because you'll have similar concerns. So hopefully by the end of the week we can share that information with everyone. But yeah, it was well received, it was well attended, and it was much appreciated by the team. And I think there were about 25 councillors that dialed into that session. So we do plan to have a mop-up in the new year as well, to see if we can accommodate people who are unable to attend at that time. So in due course, we'll probably be contacting some of those other people who can attend, see if they can go to that second session. We've also had a meeting, another focus group with Just Transition Wakefield. which took place last Thursday, which again was well attended and well received. And there was a lot of good constructive criticism of the plan from that group. And we're definitely going to take those opinions on board as part of the next iteration of the plan. The plan will change. It's very dynamic, organic. It has to, because it's an ever-changing landscape, this agenda. It's quite bewildering sometimes, actually, the pace of change in terms of new technological advancements, new funding streams, new government policies, and so on and so forth. So we really do need to be adaptable in flexing that plan to meet the needs of the country and also the environment. So the plan is in place. You can download it from the internet and the intranet sites. We're trying to push it as much as we can at the moment. We've got some ongoing surveys at the moment. There's a resident survey, which we've had 600 responses to so far, which I think is a good result considering the very difficult circumstances that people are living through at the moment. There's also a business survey as well, which has not been responded to the same extent, but business and industry are under immense pressure at the moment. And I suppose responding to a survey is probably the last thing on the list of priorities. So we are trying to find different ways that we can engage with some of those people, but it will be a process. We understand why we're having some issues in that respect. We've extended the deadline as well for consultation. It was the end of December, but it's now the end of January, and we'll probably do some sort of soft relaunch on that early in the new year to try and get more participation. But the focus group approach does work, and some of the other themed stakeholder groups are going to be things like youth parliament, infrastructure organisations, so people like National Grid, Northern Power Grid, Yorkshire Water, the Environment Agency, major developers, and so on. We're also going to run one for businesses that operate within the district, both large and small, where we can. Educational institutions will be another one. Wider public sector organisations as well. And then I think we've got one on the community, voluntary and charitable sector as well. So we should be able to get a lot of different views from a diverse array of stakeholders and then incorporate those viewpoints into the next iteration of the plan, which I would hope would be around April time. Because the thing about the plan at the moment is that it's quite inward focused. It's mainly about the organisational emissions and that net zero journey by 2030. But patently, the district-wide work is much more complex and challenging. And we do have a view. We understand the types of things we need to do in the district, but we definitely need to tease that out and get into the granular detail. And part of that is working and collaborating with other peers, local authorities, through the connections we have into the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. They've commissioned experts, independent experts, to look at a net zero plan for the local enterprise partnership and the Leeds City region, which obviously incorporates ourselves. And that's a robust plan, I feel. We've got the initial drafts, they've asked for comments, but there is going to be wider consultation with councillors around that. Again, it's a process, and it will probably last for 6 months, and there'll be public consultation as part of that process as well. So in a nutshell, we have started the work as part of the plan, and Charlie's gone through a particular area that feeds into that plan this morning. A lot of the work is business as usual as well now. It is quite embedded in terms of energy efficiency and the transition to ultra-low emission vehicles in the fleet. But all of this work now needs to be scaled up to meet the challenge. And we can't be complacent. I know it's a 10-year plan, but we're already 1 year down. So there are some big things that need to happen, some big things that need to change. And that this plan is about doing that. And I did really take on board what people are saying about development, because there's a tension there. As things stand, economic growth is not really compatible with sustainability. And when you look at house building, for example, there are hard-nosed economics associated with that around the amount of units that can be built and the price that can be achieved for those final houses, but we need to do more. So part of my team's remit is to put that pressure onto, planning economic growth housing, to try and have those conversations, those negotiations with developers to get better outcomes, to better leverage any infrastructure levy monies. I know the system is changing, but anything we can do to be more innovative in terms of green space provision, I think is a good thing. And obviously working very closely with Charlie's team who lead in this area, it's their remit, but we want to support them in any way we can, like I said, to improve green space provision across the district. So that in a nutshell is the update on the plan, I suppose. A few other little things, I guess, in terms of the energy parks that we might be able to build in the district to self-generate for our power needs as an organisation. We have commissioned a retained contractor to look at the feasibility of a technical and commercial solution for delivering that, and also an options appraisal as to how such facilities could be commercialised in a way that fits in with the aspirations of the climate change plan. There's also the SALIX public sector decarbonisation scheme, which offers £1 billion worth of grant monies to public sector organisations, specifically for the decarbonisation of heat, which is one of the hardest to treat areas. So we are going to bid into that with a multi-million-pound application, which covers corporate sites and also primary schools as well. Air source heat pumps are the technology we're going to test, with some of the ancillary measures as well around insulation, LED conversion and solar PV on some of the sites. So it's quite exciting, and it draws a line in the sand around starting some of the harder, deeper retrofits that we need to do across the estate. So I guess they're some of the short-term, immediate things that are going to happen, hopefully, where you'll be able to see positive results happening in the coming months. But there's a lot of work going on at the moment. So that's it, really, on the Climate Change Action Plan. I don't know if you want to ask questions about that first before I move on to the Green Recovery presentation.
I think one of the issues at the moment for us all is the local development plan. I think there's some doubt as to whether the consultation ends soon or at the end of December. I know there's been one or two comments about how you gain access to it, which isn't easy. But is the local development plan going to work well with your plan or our plan? And how are the two going to be brought together?
Yeah, so my team are working through the documentation at the moment to give our feedback to planning. But like you said, it's not a simple process. It's over 1,000 pages of documentation. So accessibility is sometimes an issue, especially for normal people as part of a consultation. Being able to deal with something that is quite unwieldy and complex. It would be nice to have interactive methodologies for consultation and engagement in the future to make it more reachable, I suppose, for a normal person to look at those policies and understand them and then be able to make an educated opinion on them in terms of offering their viewpoints and feedback. I have passed that on to planning as a comment, actually. But in terms of the synergies, obviously, planning is absolutely critical in terms of this programme of work. And like I said, there will always be some tensions. The policies, I think, do what we need them to do to an extent, but it's all about enforceability, whether we actually follow through on some of those policies, because local development framework as it is does have policies within it that are conducive to sustainability, but only if they are used. And sometimes the difficulty is that some of these things are dictated by national planning policy and central government wishes in regard to house building, road building, etc. So we lose power and influence to a certain degree. So it is very difficult. But I know that planning are committed to having truly sustainable development. But there, like I said, it's not easy and it's a process, and I don't think we're going to get there overnight. the master planning processes, like other councillors have already alluded to, are absolutely critical because they pave the way for the future. So we have started to be involved in a lot of those sessions across the various master plans that are ongoing within the district, and we are pushing in terms of green space provision and trying to move away from some of the status quo thinking. And actually this presentation on green recovery might cover some of these areas and make things maybe a bit clearer in terms of some of the systems thinking that needs to happen.
I think the worry is that the local development plan will be submitted soon and last for 15 years. And we'll have future scrutiny meetings in which we will say, if only.
Yes, I think you're right there. And it's about making sure that developers don't value engineer things out of the process. Because obviously promises are made sometimes, aren't they, and then not delivered. So probably when the submission went for City Fields and the tree planting on that road, Neil Fox Way is it, I think? I'm not that familiar with Wakefield. But they would have said that trees would be planted and painted a picture that everything would be great, I suppose. But it's following up on those things and making sure that they actually happen in practice. I think biodiversity net gain is a good thing. It's a step in the right direction. But again, it's all about contract management, I suppose, and making sure that promises that are made are delivered, because, you know, if you're ever installing green infrastructure, it's not just you plant it in the ground and that's it. There's care and attention that has to be paid to it. Maintenance is not a term that I like using when it comes to nature, but you do need to, I suppose, put provisions in place to give it the best possible chance of success. So yeah, it's a difficult one, and it's also about thinking about how, you know, EV charging infrastructure can help us transition towards an EV future. It's all of these things that need to happen concurrently to make communities more sustainable. I mean, we've all heard this term placemaking, but we need placemaking to be a real thing, in my opinion, I suppose. And when you're building a new estate, I suppose it's difficult to get that sense of community, at least initially. It's something that you've got to build up over time. It's not something that just happens overnight. But yes, it's really difficult, and I don't profess to be a planning expert, but it's something that we really need to get a handle on if we're going to deliver this net zero plan.
Yeah, most definitely. So now, if there's no other questions or comments, can we turn to your presentation?
Yeah, I'll just share my screen, so bear with me. Can you see my PowerPoint slides?
Not yet, no. Yeah.
Okay. I can't see anything now apart from my slides, so please let me know if you can't hear me for whatever reason. But I'm going to attempt to give you a very high level overview of what the green recovery is, why it's important, and what it could mean for the district. So it's fair to say that we're facing unprecedented challenges on many different fronts currently. This slide isn't meant to diminish in any way the seriousness of COVID-19 and the profound effect it's had on people's lives. However, it's also the beginning of a tsunami of existential threats to our society, where each coming wave has the potential to create ever greater catastrophe for both us and eventually the planet itself as well. We all know a deep recession is coming, possibly the worst in 300 years, and it could be both painful and protracted. Climate change is also here, with a limited window of opportunity to stop it from spiraling out of control. And then we have the possibility of ecological collapse, which could turn off our planetary life support systems. And the sixth mass extinction event is leading us down that path faster than many people realize. All life is interconnected, and humans can't live outside of nature's constraints. So as I said, climate change is now universally accepted as being one of the greatest threats we face. And this graph shows that even now, we've still not hit peak carbon. Despite all the rhetoric, emissions are rising as a general trend year on year. with no real end in sight at the moment. And this year is no different, even in a COVID-affected world. So despite, the economic downturn, the lockdowns, the projections are that at best it's going to be neutral in terms of carbon emissions, which is obviously very worrying. So like I said, the emissions are on the up, but the Paris Agreement targets demand rapid decarbonisation right now, as you can see from this graph and the trajectories that are involved for emissions pathways. At present rates, the carbon budget for a 1.5 degree temperature increase future will no longer be achievable in just 8 years' time. We've already lost 5 years where our reduction journey could have started, but it hasn't really started in earnest. So time is now really of the essence to start doing things differently within the economy. And if we don't change that direction of travel, the future is pretty bleak. And the science is ever clearer on this matter. And these are just some of the potential consequences at different levels of future warming. Food security could be threatened on a global level. You could have tipping points in terms of Arctic ice melt. The rainforest could begin to die back irreversibly. You could have millions of climate change refugees, societal breakdown, adaptation becoming almost impossible, the majority of species becoming extinct. You get the message, but what it could lead to ultimately is possible human extinction. And whilst this graph is a little bit out of date now, and the pledges suggest that we can possibly reach the 2 degree pathway for warming, future warming, we have to remember that pledges are just words. Without tangible action, we're not going to be able to tackle the crisis that we face. So what are the threats to our economy at the moment? Well, I'm not going to mention Brexit, but business hates uncertainty, and a flatlining economy is vulnerable to anything that can further destabilize consumer confidence and the jobs market as a whole. The recession has started already, you can see from this graph, but it's just the beginning, really. Furlough and other stimulus packages are artificially propping up all industries and sectors. But when those lifelines are cut, the consequences are likely to be severe. We're seeing what's happening to the retail sector at the moment, with gaping holes being ripped into the high street, creating a void that it's difficult to imagine being refilled based on the current model. And it's a pretty terrifying time for businesses and employees alike in so many marketplaces. And there are seismic shifts going on that are bigger and deeper than coronavirus alone. The very fabric of the economy is changing, and it's at a pace that people can't really keep up with. And there's also another spectre looming on the horizon, which is technological advancement. The economy has digitized over the past 2 decades, but now it's also being autonomized and roboticized as well, which is going to have far-reaching effects sooner than we think. We're now close to what's referred to as the singularity event, when machine intelligence surpasses our own. And the curve of development in the machine-to-machine economy is parabolic. True artificial intelligence doesn't yet exist, but soon it will, with many predicting that that's going to happen as early as 2050 or before that even. And artificial intelligence is when a machine is self-thinking and self-aware. Essentially, it's consciousness in a machine. And that will really be a game changer in terms of the future. It's something that could lead to what's being described as a post-human future. And if that isn't scary enough, much sooner than that, machine learning, robotics and automation are already on the cusp of stealing jobs. There are now reputable projections from many different observers showing that 50% of all jobs will be lost to machines by 2050. And we're not even close to being prepared for that eventuality. And I think most people are completely oblivious, really, to these very real risks that we're facing. This diagram drills a bit deeper, showing that automation won't just take jobs, it will suppress wages too. And what we need to do as a district is understand which industries and sectors will be affected most, and then seek to retool the workforce to expand into those jobs markets that are a bit safer, that still can't be filled by machines. Obviously, Wakefield has bet heavily on warehouses and distribution centres for obvious reasons, given that we're on the nexus of the motorway network, west to east, north to south. And that strategy has reaped dividends in terms of creating jobs. However, automation can and will erode those gains over time, and we can't afford to be complacent or assume that economic growth strategies that worked in the past will be fit for purpose in 10 years' time, or even 5 for that matter. It's not all doom and gloom now, hopefully. There could be opportunities, but only if we think differently and move with the tide of change. A genuine green recovery can create sustainable long-term jobs, green jobs, whilst also simultaneously helping us to mitigate climate change and reverse biodiversity loss. But it is a process, and it's not going to be easy. So what does a green recovery look like? Well, it looks like, to me anyway, a district that's adaptable, dynamic, resilient to future shocks, is self-sufficient and provides equal opportunity for all. It's an economy that doesn't topple like a house of cards after a few days if people don't go out, buy and consume stuff that they don't really need. It's creative, has ingenuity, can solve problems as they arise. It's essentially pandemic proof as well. But it has to be more than just rhetoric. It's quo thinking. We've all heard the phrase build back better, but this is, in my opinion anyway, wrongly been interpreted by many to literally mean build, as in the construction sense of the word. However, we can't build our way out of this mess alone. It has to be more than just that. It's about systemic change within society and the economy. I think whilst it's to be welcomed that the government has started to recognise and respond to the scale of challenge, the 10-point plan has some really good objectives. I personally don't agree with several of the aims and the approaches in it, but it at least shows a change in mindset. However, there are a few inconsistencies, I think. The investment of 12 billion might sound good superficially, but at the same time, 25 billion has been committed to road building during a climate emergency, which seems counterintuitive. Also, 250,000 new jobs sounds good, but the government's own projections indicate that millions will soon be unemployed. So the ambition and commitment, for now at least, doesn't really meet the scale of the challenge. So what do we need to do? Well, jobs won't magic themselves out of thin air, and neither will the skills needed to do them. We need to start from the bottom up and rethink the curriculum. New qualifications are required to target the vocational areas that the future green economy will rely on. And we need to teach children about the issue, whilst also retraining adults whose jobs are at risk, or indeed who already find themselves out of work and potentially unemployable. If the education is right, I think as well, and the pipeline of projects is created, the employment will follow, and we can begin to work our way out of this predicament. But we do need to work fast to see the results we need. Learning providers need to embrace the change in direction, and large employers with reach and influence like Wakefield Council need to act as enablers to facilitate and fuel that green recovery. In terms of the areas that are most of interest when it comes to green job creation and the green recovery, I think decarbonisation of buildings is obviously absolutely critical. And it might surprise you to hear that according to estimates, we need to retrofit 2 homes every minute between now and 2050 to reach net zero. And that process is yet to really start in earnest. And we also have a nonsense position at present wherein new houses are being built today that have insufficient insulation and fossil fuel heating, which will themselves need to be retrofitted by 2050. So accelerating action on retrofit can support more than 200,000 new skilled and semi-skilled jobs by 2030, according to industry observations and analysis. And when you have mass unemployment, you need labour-intensive jobs to fill the gap. So large-scale retrofits are a perfect outlet, really, for a green recovery. Heat is, I've already mentioned, the hardest thing to decarbonise, but hydrogen offers huge potential if curtailed and surplus renewable power generation is used to make it. It can have applications in industry, be used in to manufacture, where energy-hungry processes are needed to make things like steel. It can be used in all types of transportation, and even in peaking power plants to balance the grid. It acts as a giant battery, essentially. And the other thing it can do, obviously, is heat homes as well. At present, we don't really know whether hydrogen will be used for domestic heating at scale, or whether heat pumps and district heat networks will win that battle instead. It might be a combination of approaches. If we do go down the electrification route, ground and air source heat pumps will be a big part of that future. But either way, there are going to be lots of opportunities to create jobs in this area. Green mobility is another area with huge growth potential, but to create an electric vehicle revolution, you need charging infrastructure, and that is currently one of the biggest obstacles to mass adoption. Again, a green recovery that takes account of this need can create jobs. Renewable energy is also an integral part of this agenda. The government wants all domestic power requirements to be covered by wind by 2030. I think that's 40 gigawatts of capacity, maybe more. To match that ambition, you're going to need engineers and project managers and all sorts of different professions, multidisciplinary professions. And that's something that we could tap into potentially. We also benefit from having huge potential in the district around creating district heat networks fed by decarbonised heat extracted from wastewater in old coal mine shafts. And that has the potential to lead to a renaissance of that former industrial base, where there's also a great narrative to be told. If those old assets can be used to create new jobs, it's a nice story, I think, potentially. Ecological restoration is also a growth area, slowly being recognised that A, trees are one of the cheapest and most effective ways to sequester and lock up carbon, and B, having intact ecosystems can solve the biodiversity loss crisis whilst also providing monetizable ancillary services to us. So things like flood alleviation using nature-based solutions, for example. And these things can be a win-win because they can also enhance and restore flora and fauna at the same time. But to do things like tree planting at the scale required over these next few decades, we need people to do the work, which again lends itself to job creation. So thinking about circular economy, which is another really important area, I've got a little bit of an analogy to start with, which is the fact that we share our planet with roughly 9 million species, and all of those animals have a working solution for housing, energy, food and transportation, but none of them rely on identity, ownership or money like human systems do. And yet nature still functions far more efficiently than our own societies. And just to say that the only species that even knows the concept of waste is our own, because in nature that there isn't any waste. So at present, our economic models rely on linear economies, take, make, use, and then throw away products. And obviously that's inherently wasteful. A circular economy attempts to minimize leakages at every stage by designing out waste, eliminating things like built-in obsolescence, making products repairable and upgradable, and reusing what might ordinarily be seen as waste as a raw material for somebody else's business or process. And that can lead to dynamic entrepreneurial marketplaces, which are self-sufficient and low carbon. And I think the district's vast materials recycling facility offers great potential in terms of creating those feedstocks that could then be used in a genuine circular economy model. And I think that's a bit of a gap at the moment, because I think the waste streams from the facility are kept deliberately within the UK rather than being exported. But perhaps more could be done to internalise the processing of those secondary recyclate materials within the district itself, which again could create jobs, as this slide really attests to. It shows that reuse and remanufacture of materials and waste streams can lead to a far more job creation than landfill, obviously, but also substantially more than recycling alone as well. So another emerging concept is that of donut economics. It's been posited as a new a better model, stroke paradigm for 21st century economics. And what it does is it introduces the idea of overshoot if we go beyond an ecological ceiling, and shortfall if we fail to reach a social foundation. And the idea is that the donut represents a safe and just space for humanity to reside within, and that is within a regenerative and distributive economy. And again, this style of thinking lends itself to a green recovery by really honing in on what true sustainable development can look like or should look like. And we know that GDP as a measure of growth is too narrow and flawed to be compatible with a net zero future, because it relies on extraction and exploitation of nature and raw materials. And it also assumes that growth based on those things can be infinite, when we now know that that's not the case. So perhaps future growth will look beyond pure flows of money and instead will assign greater value to improving well-being, happiness, education, and collaboration. So maybe those things that are traditionally viewed upon as soft, but actually are really important if we're going to have societies that work in the future. So in terms of next steps, we're now at a bit of a crossroads, really. Coronavirus will soon hopefully be behind us, but there's still a long road to travel to get climate change under control. And there's no vaccine for that at the moment. What we really need now is a plan and strategy to future-proof the economy. And I know colleagues across the council are looking at some of these things, but I guess we need to bring that together now and create something more real, tangible, and formalised. So that's all I really wanted to say on the green recovery. I'm hoping that's been a useful overview, and you were able to actually hear it. I don't know if anyone's got any questions.
Well, thank you, Peter. I thought that was really not only interesting, but really exciting if we only were able to adhere to it. Are there any questions or comments?
Stand silence. Yeah. I just wanted to give you an overview.
Yeah, I think there's general acceptance and support for it. It's not only you trying to follow it through with other departments of the council, but us monitoring it on a regular basis to see what progress we can make. But I think one of the major issues is that we're still committed to private transport, aren't we, and more roads?
Yeah. I mean, there's a tension there. So I think Councillor Harvey has a question, but I suppose you can be assured that the team is looking at all of these things in a holistic sense, and I suppose putting pressure on services to try and think differently about some of the associated issues. But it will take time to change attitudes, because a lot of it is about culture change.
It is indeed.
And it's top down as well. It's difficult to make people freely make choices that are going to make their lives potentially more difficult.
Yeah, Councillor Harvey, do you want to comment?
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you, Peter, again for a wonderful presentation this morning. I suppose that I would not want to go through those 36 questions. I know that you will come back with the answers in due course. So what I'm saying is the proof is in the pudding, and I'm hoping that we have definitely had a good start as a council on climate change, and we'll tackle it together. And thank you so much for the teamwork that you have done.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. And yeah, what we've been doing at the moment is trying to build a solid foundation, and from that solid foundation will be the proactive action that's required to turn this into a reality. I'm a pragmatist and I like to get things done, and I know everyone else does in the team. So you can rest assured that we are going to drive this forward to the best of our ability.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Peter.
Any other comments, questions? I mean, we'll be having regular updates about this hopefully next year. And in the meantime, it's progressing, albeit slow, isn't it, Peter?
Yeah, there are small pockets of things happening, I suppose. For example, in terms of retraining, I know that through the NG partnership, corporate landlord team have asked NG to start retraining those operatives so that they can install some of the new types of technologies that are going to be required. And again, within fleet and transportation, I know that Graham West and his team are looking at skills development around how they're going to maintain electric vehicles going forward and gaining a better understanding of things like charging infrastructure as well. So some of these processes have started. It's just a matter of broadening them out and making them more representative of the full suite of things that needs to happen.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much. If there's no other comments or questions, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
And then finally, the last item is the Executive Leaders Forward Plan of Key Decisions. And as you can see, there's 3 items there. Kings Road, Nottingham Master Plan, Air Quality Management Areas to be reviewed, and revocation. I think that sort of we've discussed at the last meeting about the air quality, but I think there's still concern about it. So I think it should be something that we revisit. And the I'm not sure if the Nottingham councillors feel that it's a good idea to put Nottingham on the agenda as well. Comment? No?
I think it would be helpful. Personally, I think the fact that when we look at sort of air pollution and a lot of the issues, I mean, they are sort of overlap with everything we've discussed today and sort of more anyway. It sort of depends really, I guess, what sort of comes out the other end of the master plan, really, in my view.
Yeah, well, we can put it down as an information, can't we, and then see if anything develops from it. I think the other items, I'm not sure that we're always up to date on road developments, but maybe we should look at that again. Obviously, additional vehicles are going to be purchased. There's the introduction of a 106 monitoring fee. There's the adoption and maintenance of a pumping station at Horbury Bridge, which we could just get information sheets on that as opposed to having it an item on the agenda. And then finally, I think we started off discussing this, but there's the Thorns Park Stadium outcome of public consultation and options development. And maybe that's why some of the users have written to all of us, because they realised it was coming up maybe sooner than we did. And again, we can have that as an information sheet and then see if we actually want input. Is that okay? Any comments? No, I'm assuming that all those things are agreed, and we will try to develop an agenda around them. So the next meeting is on the 25th of January at 10 a.m. And looks as if it will be held remotely again. And all peace and sanity and a happy Christmas, and see you in the new year. Thank you very much for your attendance.